ordering within the block. So if someone were to pay the bribes to the block builders to include their bundles in the transaction or put their transaction at the top of the block, so they were to have a high suspicious of doing an MEV-related activity. So EigenPhi has conducted an extensive study on those transactions that was paying extra tip to the block builders. And among those transactions, the most well-known MEV types are arbitrage in atomic transaction and sandwich attacks, and also the liquidation. We have labeled and provided data on those MEV types through our products. So here is a typical arbitrage transaction will look like. So it will involve the swapping between at least 2 trading venues, and you need to have the price difference between the trading venues. And also, the bot will generate a profit after a circle back of the arbitrage. And sandwich attacks, the feature is also very clear. So the attacker will targeting on the victim's swiping pool, and then conduct front running before the victim's transaction, and then do a back running after the victim transaction to generate the profits. Here is what a liquidation transaction will look like. So the liquidator repays the borrower's debt assets, and in return get the borrower's collateral assets in a better price. So here's the 3 MEV types that we have been identified. And now let's see the recent trends in the MEV market after the merge. So there have been a few significant events that has happened since the merge. Like the 2 notable events are the FTX crash in November, and also the USDC depegging in March. And the MEV activities become more frequently during the market fluctuation. And also, with the appearance of the Jared Subway sandwich bot since April, the MEV activities has been pushed up to a new level. Here is the monthly revenue showing that those MEV bots has been generated since merge. So as you can see, during the FTX crash and USDC depegging, they were generating much more revenue than other months. And also, the Jared plays a crucial role in contributing, in making up, like in April and in May, the revenue just much more than other months. So it's obvious, like from the data, those MEV searchers definitely drained a lot of money from the market. But let's be clear, the searchers are not the only ones that are involved in the MEV supply chain. So searchers needs to split their profit to the block builder, to bribe the block builders to include their bundles in the transaction. And guess what? The block builders also need to pay the bribe to the validators to get their proposed block being accepted. So it's a whole chain of the bribing going on there. And here is the MEV, how the MEV value has been allocated in the supply chain. We have investigated on the data for the last month. So it's from the data is from the June 11th to the July 11th this year. And it can be seen that the searcher has been extracted almost $20 million revenue from on-chain transaction. And it is just based on the minimum amount because we're only considering just the arbitrage and the sandwich and the liquidation. But among those revenues, a searcher can only keep nearly like $5 million of the profit in their pocket. And the rest of the MEV rewards will flow to the builders and validators. And also the builders can only keep like $1.5 million. And then the validators are the ones that kept the most MEV rewards for around $16 million. Here I have clarified with different colors on the transfers in black and purple color, where it depends on whether there is a direct transfer at the end of the block from the builder to the validator. And according to Flashbot's definition, the behavior of the transfer from the block builder to the validator is considered as a typical MEV boost behavior. So it is worth noticing that there's a $7 million of the revenue from the searcher flow to the supply chain. But it is by the way that those builders and validators' role is not separated. So it raises concerns of the current situation of the PBS. And also there's one thing that should be noticed that is validator are supposed to generate the profit from the regular transactions. But currently, the MEV rewards has accounted for almost half of their income. So here is the data and also the MEV value allocation that we want to share. But so EigenPhi is an on-chain data platform that we kept monitoring the liquidity data, and especially on MEV. But there's a question that we kept asking ourselves, is data enough? Because we think the MEV market is a quite dark forest here, and that is because the Ethereum transactions is lack of the transparency. So like for the ordinary users, they could suffer all kinds of losses due to like swapping for a malicious token or fall into the victim of sandwich attacks. And also for the blockchain's researchers and also the data analysts, they may also be very curious about what's the most recent trends for the MEV bots. And also for the MEV bot themselves, they could be suffered the attacks only targeted on them. That's where we think the transaction analysis becomes very crucial in adding more transparency to the ecosystem. But how to do a transaction analysis? So here's the situation. If you got a transaction hash, what would you do? I think most of them will put it into Etherscan and search for the transaction to see whether it has been executed successfully or not. But what if you want to get more information about this transaction? So the information you may get from Etherscan is like the from to address of this transaction and the ERC20 transfers, all the gas fee information, the internal transfers, or even the event logs. But however, decoding this kind of information requires advanced knowledge on the blockchain. And it is hard to understand. Also, to decoding the information is still time-consuming. We believe everyone can understand blockchain transaction. So if we can get a transaction analysis tool with a feature like it provides intuitive token flow, also like the address label service, the transaction behavior label, the address group, also the measure of the transaction distance, and also the strategy identification. So this is where EigenTX could provide help. So I'm going to share some cases I'm doing when I'm trying to analyze on-chain transactions using EigenTX. Here is an interesting case when I analyze a sandwich bot. You may be wondering what recent strategies has been employed by this sandwich bot. So for example, this is a typical sandwich attack will look like. The bot will hold the assets to initiate the attack. And, but in certain cases, the sandwich bots needs to input a large amount of volume to initiate the attack. But what if the bot doesn't have that much asset in their accounts? What will they do? So here is a clever sandwich bot that comes into play. So it uses the feature of a flash swap from Uniswap. It first borrows out a large amount of USDT and then use it to attack on the target pool of Doodoo. And then it repays Uniswap by swapping out the required asset of USDC and then repay to the Uniswap. So this bot doesn't need to hold that, like 1 million USDT in the account, but they could initiate this attack. So it's leverage its position to conduct the front running. Here's another case that I want to share. Is a targeted attack we find just targeted only on the arbitrage bots. So as you know, the competition among those MEV bots is very, very intense. In order to outperform their peers, they need to optimize their gas usage. That means they would skip the steps of the security checks sometimes to save the gas. But in this way, they become the target of the specific attack. So here is a text showing how this is happening. First, this attacker is sending a baiting signal into the mempool. And this arbitrage bot just found this signal and then execute a backrunning. But this signal contains malicious tokens, this token called yoink. So here is the transaction for this arbitrage bots. Looks like the arbitrage circle went very smoothly. Say it's like start with 0.0558 WTH and back with 0.08 WTH, so it got a surplus. But you can see there is malicious transfer. That is like an abnormal transfer from this contract to the leaf address of 4.2 WTH. And what is surprisingly is this leaf address doesn't belong to this MEV bot or even the block builder's address. And we further conduct some analysis and find that this leaf address belongs to the group who sent the baiting signal to initiate the attack. Here is another scenario where someone experienced a loss due to exchange for a tax token. So you'll notice that there's a red rectangular label here. Someone was trying to swap the WBNB token in the Pancake swap pool and trying to buy some COE token. But instead of getting expected amount of the token, there is a proportion of the amount flowing to a leaf address from the cake pool. And this is what we call a tax token. Now, this kind of scenario would be easier to identify when you search in Etherscan or BSC scan with our Chrome attention. So simply load the token flowchart, and you'll see the initiate token flow happening within this transaction. So be sure to check if there is any abnormal transfer happening within your transaction so you can avoid loss without even knowing about it. Due to the time constraints, I could only share the 3 use cases that I find when I'm doing the analysis of on-chain transaction. But here, if you're interested in more new MEV strategies or complex trading strategies or even some more on-chain attacks, I would invite you to scan the QR code here. This is a booklet that we have just written with a collection of all the interesting and fascinating transactions that we have been identified. So I hope you will find anything that matches your interest and also expand your knowledge on blockchain. So happy reading. Okay, and one last thing is EigenPhi has recently launched our block builder service. So if anyone is interested, please contact with us. Okay, thank you for listening to my presentation.